Hello and welcome to this special program by the Coming Home Network International. Our Lord Jesus gave a great commission to his apostles, to all of us. Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. The great commission to go forth and take the message of our Lord Jesus Christ and his church that he established in his apostles to everyone. Of course, the message was not therefore that we only focus inward to those who already have received the faith, but make sure that every single person hears the truth of the gospel. That's what we're called to do. And to a very significant sense, that's why the Coming Home Network exists. The reason the Coming Home Network was founded was to help our separated brethren, particularly clergy as well as laity, who call us or come to us because they're discovering the beauty of the Catholic faith. And the reason we are here is to stand beside them and help them discover the beauty of this faith for them and their families. And we do that primarily, our initial calling is for clergy, but we recognized in all the years we've done this, for 18 years, that the clergyman has a wife and children and family, and then we recognized that the need to come home to the church, of course, is not only for the clergy, but what we recognize, the same issues that so many clergy face in their journey into the church, some of those same issues laity, of course, face. We have in the Coming Home Network a special support group for the wives of clergymen, the husbands of clergy women who've coming into the church. As their spouse is considering the church, they wonder, well, what about me? Or maybe they don't quite understand the issues. We have a support group also called Quo Vadis, which is particularly for teenagers of clergy families. They try and understand what their dad is doing, bringing them into the Catholic Church. Sometimes the local Protestant church has great youth programs, but not a lot in the Catholic Church. And they wonder, Dad, why are you doing this? In this particular special episode that we'd like to do today, we're focusing on what is sadly often one of the most untouched parts of the church, the young adults. For want of a better definition, we're looking at that group of members between the ages after high school and maybe up through the first time they are having children. That's generally the time that people come back to the church through RCIA, through the sacraments. But that group of young adults represents the age group in the church that seem to be the most flitting, those that tend to drift from the church, to get involved in other churches, maybe no church at all, struggle with their faith. And I know from the letters and emails that I receive, both here in the Coming Home Network as well as in response to the Journey Home program, that there are a lot of Catholics that bemoan the fact that their children and siblings have left the church, and often it's in that time period. After high school, often begins in high school, though the symptoms may be there and we may not recognize them, and then they're gone. Maybe they're not even in touch with family anymore because they've so reacted and they're out there. Then they get maybe married, and then they start having children, and often that's when they come back. We're talking about this group in the middle, but we're not talking about those who've left it. I've got three folk that, I was going to say friends, but one's my son and my daughter-in-law, and of course one of the key evangelists on our staff, Mary Clare, and I've invited them here to talk about this issue. John Mark, my son, who's on the staff here at the Coming Home Network. He's our web master, web designer. I'm not sure what your whole title is now, John Mark. It seems like it changes all the time because we see what your gifts are. A recent graduate of Bowling Green State University in philosophy, and then also recently married to Teresa. Teresa's also just within the last couple days has had her master's thesis approved in history from Bowling Green State University. She's She wants to do backflips here, but we're telling her to hold back because my first grandchild is being expected here in August, right? So that's really exciting. And Mary Clare, you've been here on our staff a couple of years now.
Yeah, about 3.5, and I came here after I graduated from Ave Maria University. So, yeah, it's been a good time.
And you bring the theology background with you. And John Mark, you spent some time in theology at Josephinum and
a little bit,
and studied philosophy. And Mary, Teresa, you have some of that same background in terms of really your coming of faith during your college years and your experience with Medjugorje and your study of that for your master's thesis. So I think all three of you bring different theological experiences. What I'd like to do as an entrance into this then is maybe we could begin with you, Mary Clare. Let the audience know a bit of your background that has brought you to now as a solid Catholic young adult.
Right. Well, as so many, I was born and raised in a very good, very solid Catholic family. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so there's a little bit of older sister responsibility there.
It's funny, I always think you might be the oldest, but you're not the biggest.
Yes, I am actually the shortest in my family. My brothers are like 6'6", so yeah, I definitely tower over me. But growing up, my parents were definitely, they very much emphasized our Catholic faith. We would, definitely go to Mass weekly, sometimes, on a weekday. We would try to go to, weekly benediction. We would, say the Rosary every night as a family, or at least we would try to. And so I was definitely instilled from an early age that, that a relationship with God is very important in a person's life. However, that's not necessarily the reason I'm Catholic today. As I was growing up, for a large part of my education, I was home educated. My mom, schooled me at home along with my younger siblings. And part of that was we would often do things with a homeschooling group that there was a lot of non-Catholics. It was primarily non-Catholics. And especially probably in 6th grade and up, there was, my friends would sometimes come to me with questions or objections or statements saying, well, Catholics believe this, or, Catholics, you're Christian, how can you also be Catholic? But they would say this very seriously. And so that kind of prompted me. I guess I'm a curious person by nature, and I would be like, well, I've always grown up with this, kind of almost a cocoon of faith, but, is it really what I want to be a part of? And, there were questions that friends, approached me with that I really wasn't entirely sure of the answers to. Do Catholics, pray to Mary? Do they worship her? All these things. And I realized that, I really had to do some searching on my own. So, from, 6th grade up through high school, there was, definitely a period of me looking into my faith. I did a lot of reading. I've always been a great reader. And, just doing a lot of really, searching, questioning, and a lot of it was just on my own. My parents had a, great library of books. I would, pick up something here and there and read, and a lot of what I was encountering made sense. I saw that there were, scriptural reasonings for Catholic beliefs. There was historical continuity there. And then I could then go back to, my non-Catholic friends and, share with them a little bit about my Catholic faith. But I think the greatest beauty that experience brought to me was a deeper appreciation for what I had grown up with. And, through high school, it was a little bit more of the same, just more of an internalizing of my faith. And for college, I decided to go to a great Catholic college, Ave Maria University, and just my time there, I decided to major in theology. It wasn't necessarily, my end in mind when I began there, but part of it arose, I wanted to learn more about my faith. And, especially I think young people have a real hunger to know, just the big questions. Why am I here? Why do I exist? Is there a God? And, all these things kind of prompted me to study theology, to try to find at least some basis for what we believe as Catholics. Because if you don't know why you believe, sometimes it's like, why would you?
And you can easily get challenged away if you can't answer those questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that I know all the answers, but at least, there's enough of a foundation that I know that if I don't know an answer, I can always find it out, and it will make, sense, and, we'll be able to go on from there. So my college years, they were a great experience. Definitely an intellectual growing in my faith, but, I've graduated, it'll be 4 years soon, and, I look back and I realize that, a simple intellectual understanding of your faith doesn't necessarily correlate to a personal growing in love of God. And so that, is definitely something that I see as a continuing journey, which brings me here today where, at the Coming Home Network, I'm continually learning, continually discovering more things about my faith. And, that doesn't mean that, I still don't have questions and challenges and things, but, I look back and I definitely see, God's hand in my life, giving me little promptings, just little guides to steer me, hopefully, ever closer to Him. So.
Right. Yeah, you never thought when you came back home that you'd end up right down the street here at the Coming Home
No,
Network.
I definitely wasn't planning on that.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Well, thank you.
Teresa, you were not brought up Catholic.
I was brought up Catholic.
Oh.
That's okay. I consider myself a revert because I came back to the Catholic faith.
I always get that mixed up in my own mind, because I always
Yeah.
think of you as really Medjugorje as being one of the key things that brought you back.
Yeah.
But I guess I remember because you had some Lutheran and Catholic kind of,
Yeah.
that was the issue
Yeah.
for me. That's right.
Well, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
My dad is Lutheran and my mom is Catholic, and I definitely had a greater religious upbringing from my parents because we lived from my mom because we lived close to her parents, and so there was a lot of, and then we went to Catholic school, so there's a lot of Catholic background there. But I didn't really understand the difference between, I didn't even understand that there was Catholic and Protestant. There were different types of Christianity. I just literally thought that people went to different churches, because my family was Lutheran. And so when I would go to church there, it looked exactly the same as my church, and we did kind of the same things. There were readings, there was communion, So it never occurred to me actually until I got to college. So so I would like to say that I was poorly catechized in my Catholic school. I didn't know until I was 21 years old that we actually believe that Jesus is present in the Eucharist. So, but even though I received a great education at both of my Catholic schools, I went to Catholic school from preschool all the way through high school, and but even though I was poorly catechized, I had these great examples in my life of both my mother and my grandmother's prayer. Even though I'd like to say that throughout my life I kind of thought of Jesus and the saints in the same way that I thought about Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. They were kind of myths or they were historical figures. They definitely weren't present in my life. And the times they were present was around Christmas or Easter. But when I saw my mom pray, religion wasn't big in our house. We'd go to Mass when we could. But when I saw my mother pray, I knew that she was having a conversation with someone else. It wasn't, I'm going to pray for the sake of the kids, or I feel like I'm embarrassed in front of praying in front of my kids or my family. My husband who's not the same religion, we're praying Hail Marys, But she always seemed like she was having a conversation with someone who wasn't there. And so that was something that I didn't understand as I was growing up, but it helped me understand that even though I went away from the Catholic faith, I always knew that God was there. I never doubted that God existed. So I grew up, and I was a pretty good girl for most of my life. And mostly because my parents, even though religion wasn't a huge part of our household, they always told me their mistakes growing up. You know, we did this, your father and I did this, and, you know, like, we regretted it. And they were just very open, even though I didn't want to hear it sometimes. They were always very open, so I understood that you could make mistakes, you could learn from them, and you could become a better person. And I took it upon myself to really understand that I can learn from someone else's mistakes, and I don't have to go out there and commit the same mistakes, which I ended up doing later. But for most of my life throughout high school, it kept me from doing drugs. It kept me from any kind of inappropriate relationships. But then I met my first boyfriend in college, and he lived a whole different life than I did. And, you know, trying to be a part, he eventually became my fiance, and trying to be a part of his family and his culture, it was definitely peer pressure, and with no basis for really the reasoning behind morality other than, like, I feel like things are wrong. You know, I let myself slide, and eventually I would say that I started, when I went to Bowling Green State University, I started living a Catholic, or not a Catholic life, a cultural life, you know, a college student life. I got a job at a bar, and I loved that experience. I wouldn't have traded that for the world. But it definitely led me to a lot of late nights, and you can go out with other people at bars that are open later than ours, you know, and just not doing great things. And eventually, because of the lifestyle we were living, and because marriage was not where we were going, my ex-fiance, broke up with me, you know, and it was really in that time of pain that I reached out to prayer, because for some reason it was a great grace, and I really attribute it to the prayers of my grandmother and my mother. I knew that the only way I was going to get through it was through prayer, was through seeking God, you know. And that led me to, my mom had been pushing this book on me for a long time, you know, maybe 6 years. You know, she had experienced a conversion maybe 6 years before I did. And she'd been pushing this book about Marian apparitions on me. And finally I was just like, well, I have nothing else going on with my life, you know, I might as well read this book. And I did, and I'd have to say, from the 6 months that we broke up until probably around Easter time, you know, it was in the fall or the winter that we broke up, but I experienced a truly miraculous conversion, truly miraculous. Like, I understood the whole of Catholic faith in about a week. I understood, like, things just made sense. Heaven, hell, prayer, the power of prayer, you know. Even though I had had non-personal experiences with Jesus and the saints, I had always loved Mary. I had loved her like she was a real person, or a mother, or an ancestor of some sort. So it's very fitting, and I feel that she had been watching me and taking care of me my whole life. You know, and it's very fitting that my conversion were to come through Mary. But after that, so I experienced this beautiful grace period for maybe about a year, and then I fell right back into those habits again, you know, started going out late, and, you know, now I was single, and there was a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of guys out there. And eventually I actually found our campus church, where John Mark and I met, St. Thomas More University in Bowling Green, because they offered confession every day. You know, and I knew I had to be going to confession every single day, or every, you know, I hope not every day, but like it was very frequently, you know. And then I was starting to receive the grace from the sacrament, and I made a real choice that I would have to change what I was doing. And I had met a very dear friend who's now in the seminary, and I kind of chose him to be my accountability partner, you know. So I would have to work late, you know, and sometimes I'd go out with my colleagues, because at this point I had started graduate school. And I would call him ahead of time and tell him where I'd be and when I was going to leave, and I'd call him when I left until I got home, you know, and that was really helpful. But eventually I realized that I wanted to serve the church for the rest of my life, because I had found what I had been searching for. Because when I grew up, my religion was magazines. You know, it was Hollywood. It was what they were doing out there. It was New Age, I would have to say, for the most part. And I realized that everyone I knew was following this lifestyle. And so I really wanted to give my life in service to the church. So I changed my degree from American history to the history of the church, which the history department at Bowling Green graciously allowed me to do while paying me. And I went through some training with the Focus Campus Missionaries, and I served as a year as a campus missionary at St. Thomas More in Bowling Green. And during my time that I was involved with the Catholic community there, I met John Mark, and we got married, and now we're here, and now we've got our first child on the way. So my life in a nutshell.
Well, again, it's not everything, but it gets us into the background.
Yeah.
All right, our token PK.
Yeah. Yeah, they told me at age of 5 I cried when I heard that my dad wasn't going to be preaching on the altar anymore. Yeah, they just told me that story again.
That's right.
Well, people always ask me in relation to your story, Dad, about whether I knew what was going on at the time when you were becoming Catholic, and I always tell them that I didn't really have to deal with any of the struggles of becoming Catholic, but I got all the graces, and so just as I was kind of getting the age of being a little bit more aware of what was going on around me, you guys were becoming Catholic, and you were excited about it, and you were into it, and we were meeting a lot of neat people and doing a lot of neat things, and so I was kind of becoming aware of faith and of God right at the time when our whole family was very excited about Catholicism. So that was great. It was a wonderful place in the life of my family to grow up in. And I don't have a real big story to tell. I think I do have some experiences that others will connect with, and that's simply that as I got to that point in my life, looking at college, a lot of big changes, getting asked a lot of questions, and I think that's a real common experience for lots of people, that at the point where you start being out on your own a little bit more, start making some of those bigger decisions. Normally for most people it's around college time. A lot of questions they're going to look at, either questions they haven't thought about before or questions that they have thought about. They're going to think about it in a new way. Once you're getting yourself up in the morning and putting yourself in your own car and going to your own parish, you start asking, why am I doing this? There's questions you may never really thought about before. And so that's what happened to me as I got to that point in my life. I went through a few years where I was just very depressed, very worried, very anxious about my faith. And I realize now, looking back, that one of the biggest sources of my anxiety is that as I encounter these questions that I just really never had to face before, does God exist? Where does the faith come from? Is it really true? It's great. I loved being Catholic. I loved having Catholic on my shirt. I loved walking around with a rosary. It was the coolest thing ever. But was it true? That never really bothered me before, but now it really bothered me. Is it true? And so, but I realized that what caused me so much anxiety was that I really thought that those questions, that if I really pursued those questions, the answer of the church would be, don't go there. Or if I asked, the priests, if I asked my friends, if I asked my parents, I didn't know some of these questions. Do faithful Catholics ask these kind of questions? And that caused me a lot of anxiety. And it took me a long time to really figure out that that's what was going on. That I didn't want to be content with just being a rah-rah Catholic, which I was. I just loved it. But I wanted to know whether it was true, and I wanted it to be true, but I wanted to know for sure. So that bothered me for a while. And I guess I started studying philosophy. I spent a brief time in seminary. I decided it wasn't my time to discern that, at least at that point. Ended up going to a secular campus, Bowling Green. They had a great Catholic community there. Had kind of the best of both worlds. I got to kind of experience the culture a little bit and deal with some of the questions, but also had a great Catholic community there. At that point, my idea of faith and it shifted a little bit. It wasn't quite correct yet, I don't think. But what I shifted to is this attitude where I just don't go there, don't ask the questions to, well, I can prove that God exists. If I amass enough evidence, I'll be able to lay myself this firm foundation, and that's what belief is. That's what faith really is having all this evidence, having all this, And that's great. And I think people kind of get into that a little bit. But the problem with that is it's just like in a relationship with a human being. You know, it's not based on evidence. It's not based on facts. It's based on a relationship. And so at that point, again, now looking back, I'm realizing that instead of trying to build a relationship with God, I was trying to build a relationship with data. You know, which that's not what faith is. And as I did with before, I became fed up with that after a while, and finally, you know, doing a lot of thought, entering a lot of silence, and doing a lot of reading, realizing that, you know, when it comes down to it, deep down inside, what I just want God, and I just want to know if He's true. And I want to have a relationship with Him, and I don't want to just kind of hope He's true, and not ask the questions. I also don't want to lay my life on a wager. You know, people often take Pascal's wager to mean that faith is all about a big gamble, but that's not what I wanted either. I don't want a big gamble to lay my life upon. I wanted to know God, and it was scary because when you finally ask that question, there's the possibility that am I going to find answers or not? But it was also good because I had to then finally realize that desire in myself and really pursue those questions. And conversion happens all different ways for different people. For some people, it's, you know, a big surge of grace and a miraculous conversion. For some people, it's kind of more of a growth and learning understanding. For me, it was just finally realizing that I just wanted to know God, and it was in seeking that in prayer, seeking that in silence, seeking that in study, that I received the gift of faith, and finally, it's mysterious, but you came to know God in a new way. And you know, obviously, faith is not against reason. All that data that I had worried and haggled with before didn't suddenly not matter, but I saw that it's not enough. I mean, you have to actually meet the person, just like in a human relationship. It's about relationship with the person. So that's where I've been building on since then. You know, I want to lay the whole my faith life on that relationship with God, and I continue to learn about the Catholic faith, and I finished my my degree in philosophy at Bowling Green, and I met Teresa, and we were married about a month after I graduated, and now we've settled down in Nashport, Ohio, and I'm working and doing web design, as you said. So.
For us as well as others. You know,
Yeah.
Like amazed when I keep bumping into brothers and they say, "Thank John Mark for our website." I said, "I didn't know he was doing your website." That's great. But as I listen to all three of your stories, a couple things jump out at me. One it is that one thing I know it's true from our experience, but there's three sets of parents represent here that are all three grateful that their children ended up in the faith. And when we look back as parents, wonder what we do right. Often we say it was by the total grace of God, because you know we're not perfect parents. And I was grateful that you didn't just tell the truth about you know, your upbringing, John Mark. But you know, but the truth is, you know, you're representing. You look back and you remember the family rosaries. You remember the examples of your parents, and you remember the examples of you. And John Mark, the thing that it's interesting here is that, which I don't know if the audience knows, when probably doesn't know, but you know, in my own marriage, when two people come together from completely different, even Protestant backgrounds with different Protestant traditions, as my wife Marilyn and I did, that we had a hard enough time when we became married to develop our own devotional life as a Protestant couple, and it was even more difficult in some ways to come in as a Catholic family. So we didn't have the nightly rosary. We would try it. How many times did we try it, you know? I mean, there's Richard running around with a lasso with, you know, I was like, look out, you know? So, I mean, we would try, and, you know, again, as I said, we do the best we can as parents, and when our children end up in the faith, we're so grateful. But there's also, as you all three know, there are a lot of your friends who came up with you that are not in the faith anymore. They're gone. We're going to take a break right now, okay? When we come back, let's ask that question. Why are you here and they're not? Does that sound good?
Good.
We'll do that when we come back. So we'll take a break, and we'll come back with more discussion about young adults in the church.